Hi, I'm David Tench. I'm a musician. I'm a musical director of television shows like The Voice. And I've also got experience working with various pop artists on tours and in the studio. And I'm here as part of the Music for All charity. And it's just a series of tips that I'm going to share with you to help you and encourage you to make music without any fear. Music really is for everyone. And it's something that helped me growing up, helped me to establish my confidence, and I think it can do the same for everybody. So I encourage you to enjoy these tips and apply them and just enjoy that time making music for yourself. Okay, this tip is about harmony and exploring harmony and playing with it. We're so fortunate as keyboard players to be able to play multiple notes. So one thing that I did when I was starting out as a kid was I would play notes and listen to how other notes related to them, to the first one, and enjoy that playing around. And actually it was on an old electric organ. It was on a Yamaha Electone organ. We had it in the house. So it was so enjoyable to just pick a note, as I'll do now. I'll just play middle C. And of course on an organ I could just hold it down and enjoy listening to that note for a long time. Piano, you'll have to keep restriking it. But it doesn't matter what the instrument is. You can pick a note at random with your eyes closed. You can pick a note at random and just explore and feel how that, what relationship that has and how musically it makes you feel. So I'll just do, without thinking, I'll play another note. So I know, just because my ears have developed, that I just played the 6th note in the scale. And I hear it as a major. For some reason, I filled in the gaps to sound like this. But actually, it could just as easily have been a minor 6th. But I would encourage you to just spend time and let the clock tick and let the time go by while you just enjoy these relationships. And then try another one. So that feeling of that 4th there has a feeling of sort of a lack of stability. So which direction is it going to go in? You could try pushing it up, pushing it down to the next note. And then try up. Obviously what I'm doing is introducing rhythm to this as well, so it almost feels like a piece of music. You don't have to do that, you can just play randomly. You also don't have to start with the C, you can just start anywhere. That feels pretty unstable, so I've gone an octave and a second. And what I did then as well is I employed some dynamics, so I decrescendoed through that and suddenly it felt musical. But these things come to you and should come to you naturally without even knowing what notes you're playing and their relationship to each other. You can start to familiarise yourself with how these sounds relate to one another and how they make you feel, both musically and just emotionally. Okay, so my next tip is about seeing the piano in a more simple way. When you look at 88 keys, it can be quite daunting. It's worth remembering that it's several octaves and it can be divided in that way. So if we play a middle C, when you sit down to play piano for the first time or you're taking a lesson, that's pretty much the first thing that you'll be shown, is where this is. And you'll learn its position based on its relationship to the other keys. You'll start to see how it looks. But what you need to remember is that there are several Cs and they're all across the keyboard. This is C4, C3, C2, C1. And there it follows that the 12 tones that are in relationship to that reset when you get to the next C. So I encourage you at the very beginning of your learning to restrict yourself to within one octave. If you're improvising, just play what's within that place, because you won't then be distracted by all of the other notes that are available to you. It can be tempting when you sit down to play. I did this when I was a kid, to start playing and then play all over the place. And you get kind of overfaced. There's too much music, too many possibilities. So if we take the C major scale, and we know that those notes exist elsewhere, wherever we play, it's going to be the same. So if I write a little tune within that confine, I'm going to use accidentals too. I'm going to use sharps, flats. Okay, so that was a little phrase I came up with, but now I know that that can exist elsewhere on the keyboard. I think I changed that slightly. But anyway, it moves around, and then you can start to see and compartmentalize the piano keyboard and see where you can play and how it will sound different. It sounds different if you play it in higher and lower registers, but I just encourage you to play pieces within one place. It could be a very simple thing like this. As soon as you go lower, you're adding complexity that's perhaps too much for you at this time. So try and see them as like blocks, C to C. And then you'll break out of that in other ways when we talk about inversions in other tips. But for now, try and play your music, your chords, all within that place. Just almost tape off the rest of the piano keyboard, because whatever you do will apply elsewhere. Okay, so my next tip is also about using our ear to make music, but this time trying to learn what these different sounds, these different intervals sound like. So what I'm going to do is start again with middle C, and then I'm going to play another note, and we'll assign it a name. So we're going to assign it a number, actually. And then when we can learn these numbers and memorize how they sound, it can really unlock our musical knowledge. So if I play this note, this C, and then play this G, I've played a perfect fifth. So this is a tone, a sound that we can recognize in music. It almost sounds quite regal, and actually it's used a lot by John Williams in his famous film scores. Superman starts like this. So all of these jumps in the music, in the melody, are intervals, and I think when you learn their numbers and how they relate to the first note, then it can really help you and unlock your knowledge. So I'm going to play another note. So this is the second note of the scale. And actually, just for the sake of clarification, I'm going to go through the scale. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 is back to 1, because as you can see, this C is the same as this C. So then as you play around with these intervals, you can start to learn them and give them numbers, and you'll start to recognize how they sound. And you'll hear them in songs that you like. Loads of pop songs constantly go from the 4 down to the major third. And then you can embellish on that and play with it and give it a bit of time, a bit of rhythm. And all I'm really doing there is keeping my tonic, my root note, and just playing a fourth and a third in relation to it. Now I'll try a different number, so I'll jump up to 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I'll go from 7 to 6. So this is the major 7th down to the 6th. Which has a much more sort of ethereal and optimistic sound to it. And these are things that you can learn and memorize, you know. So you can say, well, today I'm feeling I want to make music with that kind of feeling, that emotion, so I'll choose the major 7. Well, I'll start with my C, and I know, by counting up 7, that the 7 is a B. And I'll just embellish a little bit further on that and make up a small tune using that interval. I'll try a different bass note. So I'm composing straight away, and I'm also learning those intervals and how they relate. I'll try a minor one now. So I'll stay in C. I'll go to the 3rd degree, but then I'll flatten it by a semitone, which of course changes the tone completely and has it makes us feel completely different. All I did was add rhythm to just that C minor triad, and then I'm making music, and I'm making music with a different feel. I'm being inspired in different ways. If I jump to another key, say I want to be an E flat major, now I'll say, right, well, I want something here that is using the 4th degree of the scale and the 6th. So I'm going to play around those two intervals. So I play my E flat chord, and I jump up to my 4th note. And then I jump to my 6th note. And this feels really unstable actually, because I've established the key, but now I'm playing notes that feel like they want to go somewhere. My instinct tells me straight away to resolve them back to E flat because I've established that key. But I'm going to play with it and enjoy that tension, like I was talking about earlier with playing around with harmony. And I'll resolve it. Back up. And don't be afraid to just let that note ring out, all those notes ring out for a long time, and learn that relationship. Learn how it makes you feel. Actually, be random with it. Just be creative. Just stick your fingers somewhere else. Okay, I've made a 5th there from F to C, but I'm going to do other strange things up here. And later on I'm going to talk about rhythm, so now if I imagine that there's a pulse running through this, I can compose and enjoy that composition based on a rhythm that's flowing. Later I'll talk about that more. Okay, my next tip is about using a metronome, which might be something that's often overlooked by people, but it's really important. Playing in time is so important, especially if you're going to do popular music, actually. It's important to keep that tempo throughout whatever piece you're playing. It really doesn't matter what it is. And I would encourage you to start rehearsing start practicing each day with the metronome running. So I'm going to use one that's just an app on my phone, actually. You can use the old traditional wooden type that tick-tocks like this. You can use digital ones. There's loads available and they're all cheap. But this one here does the job fine. It's just running at 110 beats per minute. You can move it to whatever speed you like. And then you'll find that when you practice, even if you're just improvising as you practice, which I encourage to, using your ears, then it will keep you in time. And there's actually a real sense of achievement when you're able to play those quarter notes with accuracy with the tempo. So I'll just do a little bit more of that. I'll select, say, just a C major triad. Let's assume we're beginning there. Now, it seems relentless and boring, but actually there's a lot of fun to be had in playing with the dynamics, the accuracy of where it's placed in time, how hard you hit the keys. Each of those three notes in the chord, what we're aiming for is consistency between them so that the chord rings out at the same volume across all three notes. So I'm going to try now really to get it perfectly in time and perfectly even, just as an exercise to myself. And now I'll move that around and I'll play a few other chords that I know and just always keeping that time going. I might do a few embellishments, but it's just to remind you to stay in time. Now I heard myself get ahead. I heard myself play a beat ahead. And that I'll talk about in my next tip actually. But I'm going to try one more time. And the more things you try, the places that you go with your music, the things you try to do, the harder it becomes to actually keep that tempo going. It's so important, and I'm going to go talk about it in a next tip, which is about playing with other people. It's very hard to play with other people, sustain that music, if you can't keep the meter. Okay, so my next tip is a reminder, really, to utilize the technology around you to record what you're playing. My tip is about recording yourself and listening back. Now, this is something, again, that's overlooked because you think to yourself, well, I'm sitting down to play music, I want to enjoy playing that music, and I don't necessarily need to analyze what I'm doing, but actually, it's the key to improving. Whatever you decide to play, whatever piece you're doing, if you're reading something, if you're improvising something, if you press record on something and then spend time listening back, you can analyze what you did and you can say, okay, I was out of time in that section, I played flat, I played sharp, depending on what instrument you're on, and then you can fix it for next time, and it's just the key to improving. So again, like in one of my other tips, get that tempo going, get that metronome going, play something, record and listen back. Now, recording yourself these days has all kinds of different implications. It can be as simple as just using an app on your phone, or it can be a tape recorder like the old days, or it could be that you have a digital audio workstation. You can multi-track what you're doing, you can add things, you can listen back. But if you want to learn to play an instrument and enjoy playing music, I encourage that you don't use quantizing and other effects to put yourself in time. Put yourself in time and enjoy being the master of that. So set that tempo going. So it's just an improvised thing, something for me to practice with. But I think whatever it is you're doing, if you then listen back to what you did, I guarantee that you'll hear something that needs attention and something that you could have done better. Certainly what I just played wasn't perfect. So if you record and listen back, I think you'll improve. Okay, so my next tip is about playing with other people. Now, when you're starting out learning an instrument, it can be sometimes uninspiring to be stuck in a room, just you and the instrument, and you can employ lots of things, you can enjoy it, you can spend time on it, but in the end, music is a social activity. Playing with other people always inspires and makes you feel better about the music you're making. So what I would encourage you to find a group that you can play with, put a band together, whether it's at school, college, whether it's down the local church hall, whether it's a pre-existing ensemble that's already rehearsing. Get involved, send them a message, see if you can play. If you play ukulele, maybe there's a little ensemble, a ukulele orchestra even, and then you'll get to know people who are learning the instrument with you or just learning music. You'd be surprised how those connections with other people can broaden your perspective on music and encourage you to get better. When I was younger, I went to various school bands, I went to community bands, I toured the world eventually with a youth jazz orchestra. So it was such a fantastic experience. And it's not just the music, it's the people and it's their experiences all being thrown together. Eventually, because you're all learning music, conversations will turn to music. People will say, have you heard this record? Have you checked this out? Have you tried to play this way? Do you know how to do this chord? And this is not just about music, but it's about life in general. That communication and honesty and openness is how you can prevail, how you can learn, and how you can teach others without even knowing you're doing it. And never ever feel like you're not good enough to join other people to play. It doesn't matter. Even if you know 3 chords and you can barely play a tune, get to know people, talk to them, find out more. You'll find that people are often really positive and encouraging, and you will help one another to get better at making music. Okay, so my next tip is about listening to music. Now, if you are interested in making music, you would think that it's a given that you need to listen. But actually, what you should do is perhaps ask yourself how much you listen to music, how often, and how varied the music is that you're listening to. It's important to imbibe as much as you possibly can from the music around you. And let's be honest, it's everywhere. If you're watching TV in the evening to relax, there's music happening. Somebody's put a lot of care and attention into the compositions that back the drama and help bring out that drama. So that's one place. But then there's the records, there's the singers, the popular music, interpretations of classical repertoire, anything you can get your hands on. When I was a kid, my mum worked in the library, the public library, and it was such a resource for me, a wealth of material. She would bring CDs back to me, or I would go and get them myself. And I did not discriminate at all. And I encourage you to do the same. Take the CD, whatever it is, and press play. Go to Spotify, whatever it is. Just imbibe all that music and set aside time to do it. Let the clock run and just call it your own time to connect with the music. It's a time to rest and not play an instrument. Perhaps if you've been frustrated trying to do a certain thing on your instrument, then move away, take a break, go and listen to something, enjoy it, find something in it. It could be that you enjoy the harmony and how it moves. It could be the tension that comes from the rhythm in the music. It could be a melody that soars, that grabs your attention. It could be the latest Ed Sheeran that's been #1 for 7 weeks. I guarantee if you look hard enough, you'll find something to inspire you. And even if it's subconscious, it'll come out in your music making when you sit back down to play your instrument. So my next tip is about finding a piece of music that is somehow within your ability level. So this is takes a little bit of humility on your part, really. And I remember a moment when I was younger, maybe about 12 or 13. So I discovered Prince for the first time and I was just going nuts. I was loving everything that he did. And there's a section on the Love Sexy album where he does this whole kind of improvised piece playing on a string synthesizer, string sound. And it was gobbledygook to me. Couldn't understand the music, couldn't understand what he was doing. Loved listening to it, but couldn't play it. Right after that section is the start of a song called Anastasia, which did sound like it was something that I could achieve. I'll play a little bit of it. It went like this. And then it looped. So it took me a while to pick out what these notes were, but once I did, I could then play along with that record start to finish, and I felt like the king of the world. So I encourage you to try and find something like this. It could be anything, whatever turns you on, whatever inspires you. It's got to be something you love. But if you find it, then you can use your ears, use the techniques we talked about, like the intervals and knowing which numbers they are. I'll talk about that song Anastasia now and show you how I figured it out. So I knew I would find the top note first, and you could find it, if your ears aren't good, by literally playing around until you get to the note that you're dealing with. And then you need to use the things that you've practiced, your intervals, your ears, to know, well, which direction does this note go in? Does it go up or down? Well, I knew that it went higher, not that high. That's the note it went to. That's an achievement in itself. I can't remember what happened when I was 13. I might have even taken a break and had a biscuit then, because I'd achieved the first phrase of that song. And then I would piece it all together. I knew that it went down next. And again. That was a miracle for me to be able to play that top line. Now, obviously, you add in the other notes by trying to find out what's the bottom note that we're hearing. Well, it's not down here. And you keep playing around until you get there. And eventually, you'll piece this together. Now, achieving this music and being able to play it in that way, all on your own, just using your ears, is such a wonderful feeling when you get to the end. And like I said, I'm not going to do it now, but if you press play on the record and play along, and then embellish and sort of play with it. That was me for weeks. So I hope that you can find something too. Find something that's achievable, not too difficult, but you can enjoy, and you don't get tired of listening to yourself play over and over. Okay, so my next tip is to encourage you guys to try and use a different way of making the music before you play it on your instrument. So it can really help solidify your knowledge of what that piece is if you tap the rhythm out before you play it, or maybe even sing it. Now, the tapping thing harks back to another tip that I was talking about, which was using a metronome and staying in time. So what I would encourage you to do is pick the piece of music that you're going to be working on, tap the pulse, the rhythm of the tempo, basically, and then tap out the rhythm of the actual piece with your other hand. So earlier I was talking about the theme from Superman, John Williams. I'm going to use it again. This has an interesting rhythm, so I'm going to play it. So when I was a kid, that was a theme that I really loved. I found it fantastic, so I wanted to be able to play it. But it would help, I didn't do this at the time, but I'm encouraging you to practice just tapping the tempo with one hand and the rhythm with the other. So I'm going to do that now. Count myself in. 1, 2, 3. So what I've done there is practice the independence between one hand and another, but also I've placed it into my heart, into my body, what that music is and what it needs to be. Now, the first time you try this, you might be wavering around the place. And then it doesn't work. So I would encourage you to use a metronome if you can, set that going, then that's like a double whammy. You've got something going click, 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 click. Whatever the rhythm is, whatever the piece is, I think if you get that into yourself first, you can tap anywhere, like I said, on a table, on your body, then you're listening it. Also, this can be done absolutely anywhere. So you could just be annoying your partner on the sofa. You could be doing whatever. Music is always flowing through you, and you should always be thinking about it in those terms. Well, what's that rhythm? How does it relate to the strong beats in the bar? Another tip as well is to sing the tune through before you actually play it. Even if you're a terrible singer like me, it doesn't matter. It helps you in two ways. It helps you internalize what that tune is, and it also helps you learn more about the direction of the melody. Because as your voice goes higher, you will know, you will internalize that's a higher note, and it'll tie all these things together. You'll learn intervals, you'll learn what's going higher, what's going lower, your ears will get stronger. So again with that theme, da, 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 do, da, da, dee, da, da, dee, da, do, da, da. I know I have to go da, da, da. So I've practiced that tune now, I've internalised it, I've sung it, I've tapped it, and I should be able to then play it more easily when I go to my instrument. Okay, so my next tip is about composing small phrases that repeat. Now, when you sit down to compose or make up music for yourself, it's a wonderful, liberating feeling, but it can be too much because there are too many options. The world is there for you, laid out. Especially if you play piano, you have 88 keys, anything can happen, any music can come out. It's a wonderful thing, but it almost can be daunting and then you stop. So my tip is to encourage you to pick a kind of restriction. So pick a key that you're going to write in, pick a rhythm, remember use that metronome to keep the time, and then write something that's maybe 2 phrases that loop. So I'm going to do that now, just off the top of my head and see what comes out. So I'm going to choose to play in A flat major. And I'm going to write a little tune in A flat major and let's see what comes out. Now the trick here is to stop and say, right, well, I wrote 2 phrases. And if you were listening to the other tips, which were about recording yourself and using the metronome to stay in time, you should now be able to listen back and straight away have that feedback of the thing that you came up with. Now, I didn't reinvent the wheel there. I just wrote a little tune. I'm sure it's very similar to many others. But if you force yourself to stop and say, right, that's my tune, I'm going to work with that for the next hour or whatever and enjoy it. Let's do that one more time. Now, I accompanied myself with the left hand, but you could literally have just played with the metronome going, and you've given yourself a context. You've put yourself in common time. 1, 2, 3, 4. You've played a melody that moves around. You're in a place. Now, you can then experiment with the stuff we talked about earlier about playing different notes, different harmonizing notes. You can push that theme to different places. I'm going to do a little bit of that just by changing the bass notes. So the left hand, I'm going to try different notes, but I'm going to keep my melody exactly the same and see where it takes me. I had to make an adjustment because I selected a minor chord. But this is a way of developing themes and and enjoying how you can move around within the music, but also giving yourself a slight framework. What I'll do now is just play you the first thing that I can remember composing. Now, it might not have been the first thing, there were probably other things, but I was so chuffed with myself. It's massively derivative, it sounds like lots of other pieces of music, but it reflects my ability at the time. I hadn't learnt different inversions of chords, so I was just breaking them up and staying in time. This is what I came up with. So it was like an exercise. What I've basically done is compose myself an exercise, something to play for my fingers to use. But you'll hear that I was very restrictive in my compositional technique. Now, that doesn't always work, doesn't apply to every particular setting, but as a learning tool, it's good to be able to confine yourself and then explore what's available to you within those confines. I think I was about 8 when I came up with that, so it doesn't reflect where I'm at now. But it shows, if you look again, you'll see, as a beginner piano player, you will recognise those chords. C, F, G, D minor. I played a 7 to lead into the F in places. They're very simple things, but it's just what was available to my ears at the time. I could have started playing in G minor and the piece might have been really different. Repeat. I'll change the bass note. I don't know where I'm going. You just play with it and then you remember that, take that recording, remember that phrase, and then you can come back to it. You could play it slower, you could play it in a different register. And you might find that you're inspired in that way. So my tip is to try little phrases, come up with things, little ideas, record them, come back to them. They'll change with your mood, and that's a nice thing. Okay, so my next tip, which is keyboard specific, is about playing around with inversions of chords. This was something that really opened up my understanding of the instrument and unlocked much deeper understanding. So I'm going to show you really simply what I mean. When you start to learn chords, you probably are learning them with no inversion. It's a simple way of getting a song going. So say you're in C major again. This is a C major triad with no inversion. I'll play an F with no inversion. I'll play a B flat with no inversion. But what you'll notice about as I play these triads, whether they're major or minor, there's quite a lot of movement of my hand on the keyboard. So I'll move around a few randomly and you'll see the jump. So those are all chords that you'll learn pretty quickly as you start to get into music, but because I'm not playing any different inversion, I'm having to jump. I have to constantly take my hand off the keyboard and reset to play that A flat. That's, it can be slow going. So my tip is to learn about inversions. So the first inversion of C would be like this. This is our C triad. I'm going to take the C at the bottom and I'm going to move it 1 octave up because we have the same note. You hear how they have the same tonality, just 1 octave apart. So if I move this note here, I'm now playing a C first inversion. Now if I move this major third, this E, up an octave, I'm playing a C second inversion. Now, what I'm doing there is I'm freeing up ways to play that chord, which means I can move around the keyboard much more easily. So now, if I wanted to go from C to an A flat chord, for example, with no inversion, it would look like this. But if I decided to play the second inversion of A flat, remember what we talked about, take the bottom note, first inversion, take the third note, which is now the new bottom, second inversion. What I'm going to do is play the first inversion of A flat, but I'm going to get there from C. Now, I haven't had to move very much at all. I've just dropped my middle finger down one and my top finger up one. If I wanted to go to A flat, rather than resetting and going to no inversion, I might go to the first inversion again. Or maybe I'll finish the phrase by playing first inversion C. So I've created a piece. Now, you might notice that a melody's starting to emerge in what I'm playing. And this is the thing about inversions and what it frees you up to do, is write melodies while playing chords, but the melody will dictate which inversion you play of that chord. So if my melody is... say that's our tune. So we'll start with no inversion C. So now I've played the melody and I've harmonized it, and I've been able to do that by breaking out of no inversions. Here's an example of playing that tune and chords with no inversion. So I could go... But with our inversions, I can incorporate it. I can even play left hand too. I hope that helps you to see more possibilities in the keyboard. Okay, so my next tip, or more of a kind of opportunity really, for a beginner to get into music and get into playing the piano. This tip is about restricting yourself to all the white notes or all the black notes. Now, we have this wonderful thing on the piano called the sustain pedal, which makes all of the notes ring out. Sorry if I'm teaching you to suck eggs, you know this already, but it can be really beneficial to give yourself only one set of keys and see what compositions come out or what music flows out of you. So again, this harks back to our interval training. We were talking about different notes and how they react and interact with each other. So if we sat at the piano and said, right, we're just going to play black notes, you can literally just place your hands anywhere and see what comes out. Again, I recommend setting the tempo, get the metronome going, but just play and see what happens. You don't need to know any chords or anything, but if you give yourself a rhythmic context, I guarantee some music will flow. So what I've done there is basically establish an E flat minor pentatonic. And actually when people learn piano, there's quite a lot of, what's that piece that they play? So this, it's basically starting on those black notes. It's quite easy, it's easy to feel around. Actually, if you enjoy the music of Stevie Wonder, you'll notice that a lot of his compositions are in E flat minor. Superstition, for example. Because playing in that percussive way, once you take away all the white notes as an option, it's very easy. Of course, he can play many other things too, but it's just a really nice way to start. So my tip is to encourage you to sort of let time go by, give yourself time to engage with the music, and just set yourself that limitation. Play only black notes. And try establishing different bass notes and see how that changes the sound and the relationship to the tune you've written at the top. And when you have the sustain pedal on, you can actually just play all of these and it makes a lovely sound. Enjoy it. You don't need to be able to play the piano at all to actually do that. Another tip is if you play a B in the bass note and then hold the sustain pedal and do that, it sounds so sweet. Listen to this. What you've established is a B major 9. And if you're anything like me, you can get lost in that for about 20 minutes. Keep striking that B. A tempo has emerged if you've got that metronome going. And if you're not that advanced, it doesn't really matter. It's just a lot harder to make a mistake if you've established that constriction. So try that. Do the same with the white notes. So here we would have a C major scale. But you can do exactly the same thing. I'm just going to show you and move that bass note around and hear the different tones. So if I establish it over an F, we're in a different mode and we can enjoy the sound of that. What I'm trying to encourage you to do actually is enjoy all the different music making things. I'm making music in different ways without even thinking twice about it. And you'll do the same thing instinctively. You'll grow in dynamics, you'll get louder, you'll get softer, faster, slower. But you're making music all the same. I'll try it over a different bass note. It's just a way to learn and enjoy, and if you partner that with the other tips, like listening to music, playing with others, playing to a metronome, slowly but surely your knowledge of music will grow and hopefully your enjoyment of it too. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed those tips. Hope maybe they made you think about your music making in a different way. Most of all, it's about enjoying it. So get out there and enjoy making music. If you want to know any more about the Music for All charity, you just need to go to musicforall.org.uk.